I bid you welcome.
Dracula's Daughter is the only canonical sequel to Dracula released in 1931 starring Bela Lugosi. This is the only sequel that carries on the lore that was established in 1931's Dracula. Think about that for a minute. This movie wasn't even supposed to be called Dracula anything because the Stoker estate was so protective of the intellectual property. It took producer David O. Selznick, yes, the same guy who produced Jaws, to create some kind of a deal in order to get them to license the Dracula name for this movie. I believe the deal was about $5,000, which I'm sure must have been a ton of money back then. And this movie was even supposed to include Lugosi himself as Dracula making a return. However, he turned it down because he was afraid that he was going to be typecast. And so Dracula was completely removed from the project, and instead it would be revolved around Dracula's daughter, played by Gloria Holden. Holden hated horror movies and looked down on them, so she was not a fan of doing this role. It's ironic considering the fact that she's pretty much the best part of the movie. Her character starts off as wanting nothing to do with being a Dracula and wanting to just completely rid herself of the legacy. However, slowly going down the rabbit hole to the point where it just becomes too much for her and she succumbs. The production team and the director really didn't have much to go on in terms of lore. This movie was based on a deleted chapter from Dracula called Dracula's Guest, so they were pretty much thinking on the fly, but I think they cobbled a good enough story to make it work. And in later years, it has been noted upon and shown in further criticism that this movie has a lot of lesbian undertones. Though watching the movie, they're more like overtones because you would be a dummy to miss it. There was this book called The Celluloid Closet written by Vito Russo, and in the book he cited this movie and talked about how Universal kind of wanted to lean into this whole lesbian overtone thing and even considered having a tagline on the poster, "Save the Women of London from Dracula's Daughter." Naturally, this did not end up making the final marketing materials. But it is really interesting to think about, especially in 1936. There was no way that they would have been able to get away with any of that. But they definitely snuck a lot of stuff in there, that's all I will say. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Dracula's Daughter is definitely something that I would say is underrated. And it's really sad that this movie is as overlooked as it is because it is the only sequel to 1931's Dracula, and Bela Lugosi was so against playing the role in other movies that it was like he was trying to distance himself from it, which is a shame, but I mean, to each his own, I guess. Seek this movie out if you haven't already.